Hi everybody, I hope you're all okay and thank you so much for tuning in to another Her Game 2 space presented by me. I'm Charlotte and I'm Her Game 2 ambassador for Rochdale. This week is Diabetes Awareness Week, so everybody at Her Game 2 wanted to raise awareness on our platforms and talk about it. So today's topic is diabetes in the football community. I am extremely lucky to be hosting this space tonight. I don't know much about diabetes, so I'm very much looking forward to finding out more and being educated myself on this particular topic. I am joined by some very special guests this evening. My first guest for tonight is founder of the diabetes football community, Chris Bright. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Chris, and how are you doing this evening?
And having this opportunity to talk about diabetes, and obviously which is awareness of what it's like to live with diabetes. So yeah, thank you so much for inviting me on and also for doing this space. So yeah, really appreciate it. And in general, yeah, not too bad. Been busy day at work, but yeah, that's the norm, isn't it? So yeah, thank you very much and hope you're all right as well.
Yeah, I'm all good, just apart from my sneezing, which I mentioned before. I'm struggling with my hay fever at the minute, so I can't stop sneezing. So I do apologise if I do sneeze a lot on this space.
Both at the moment, the hay fever is brutal, isn't it? So yeah, no, I feel you on that one, Char. I feel you.
Honestly, like I've survived a pandemic, but I'm getting taken down by hay fever. But yeah, we're also joined tonight by three fantastic ladies who have kindly offered to share their experiences too with us on here. We have Louise and Lucy from TDFC Women and presenter, podcaster and voice artist Vicky Blight. How are all you ladies doing?
Good, thanks,
good.
yeah.
Good, thank you.
All good.
Oh, good stuff. So yeah, brilliant. So we're going to start at first. We've got a little bit of a structure tonight. We're going to start with a little bit of a chat about diabetes in general, your personal experiences and how it's impacted your lives. Then we'll talk about diabetes in the football community and finish with a Q&A session at the end where you can answer questions from the listeners. So yeah, anybody that is listening, you are all more than welcome to obviously send in any questions. So please tag my @ which is SharXRAFC, and then followed by your question and who you would like to answer it. But yeah, the structure is I'm basically going to ask you some questions and you're all more than welcome to answer and you're all allowed to have your own input. It's not just for one particular person. So first of all, what is diabetes and how can it be tested?
Wow, who wants to start with that?
Yeah.
What is
it? Well, just to say to start with, there are two types of diabetes, and even though they're both called diabetes,
yes,
some health professionals think they should be called two different things because actually one is an autoimmune condition and another is about insulin resistance. So for people with type 1 diabetes, as I say, it's an autoimmune condition, and it means that your immune system has basically attacked the beta cells in your pancreas, and you don't produce insulin, or you produce very little insulin now. So to deal with food and everything that you need insulin for, to give your muscles and all your cells in your body energy, glucose, we can't do that. So we have to artificially take insulin and manage our blood sugar that way. People with type 2 diabetes, some can be on insulin, but others can be managed with tablets and diet. And that is more about, as I say, insulin resistance. And there can be many factors. There could be an underlying health condition which has made them predisposed to that. It could be lifestyle. Obviously, we see a lot about obesity and diet and general health, and how type 2 diabetes can be something that many people have to deal with later in life. But yeah, they're two very different things, obviously both affecting blood sugar and both very tricky to live with. But yeah, two very different conditions in some ways.
And just adding on to that, how can diabetes actually be tested? Like, is there a particular test that obviously you have to go through to obviously diagnose what kind of diabetes you actually have, or diabetes? Is there just some like kind of test or anything?
Yeah, I think
can be discovered?
there's a lot of symptoms, so they are different. Type 1 diabetes
Yes.
is the 4 T's,
Yes.
which is toilet, thinner, tired, and the last one is thirst, I think.
First, yeah.
Yeah, so they come on quite quickly if you're getting diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. They come on within weeks, whereas if you've got type 2 diabetes, it could take up to 10 years for you to actually be diagnosed with diabetes. Type 1, usually if you go to the doctors with these symptoms, they will do a blood glucose test, which is where you'll probably find out whether you've got type 1 diabetes.
A question for all of you as well, really. How old was you when you discovered you were a diabetic?
I was diagnosed when I was 13 years old. So I'm 23 now, so I've had it for 10 years.
I was diagnosed when I was 11, and I'm getting on now, 28 now. So, yeah, 17 years.
At the age of 8, and I am now 31. So it's 22, nearly 23 years for me diagnosed with type 1 diabetes.
And I'm the newbie, so I'm 41, but I was diagnosed at 37 in 2019. So, yeah, for me, it came on a bit later, and we're actually seeing more people in their 20s and 30s being diagnosed with a form of type 1 diabetes now.
Wow. So it's just crazy. It's just crazy, isn't it? Like, just in general, how it can just suddenly, like, with your body, it just can suddenly, like, happen, like, no matter what age you are or what sex you are. It's crazy. But leading up to being diagnosed, what was your experiences like beforehand? Did you suffer with any health conditions, or you mentioned before any particular symptoms?
For me, I lost a lot of weight. Going up to my diagnosis, I lost like around 1.5 stone quite quickly, and also the thirst for me was a big thing, which obviously then leads you going to the toilet a lot as well.
Yeah.
So it was quite apparent to my mum, who's got people in the family with type 1 already as well, so she recognised the symptoms quite quickly.
Yeah, so I had a similar. The first, my mum used to have to force me to like drink some water before I went to school, and then one summer I was just couldn't quench that thirst. I was drinking loads and loads and loads, and my auntie is type 1, but obviously I think even still it wasn't like so obvious that was the direct symptom, but after going to the doctors and then obviously it coming up as what it possibly could be, we obviously then tapped into my auntie a bit more to find out stuff. But yeah, it was mainly first for me.
Because obviously there's a bit of a link in the family, and I had the same kind of links in the family with my granddad being type 1 diabetic. God know that I was ever diagnosed with type 1. He passed away before it happened, but
Chris, your audio is a bit dodgy.
Shall I pick up from Chris for a bit until we get him back?
Please. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. So yeah, for me, the same thing. I had this incredible thirst. I lost over a stone in weight in a matter of months. But me and my wife had recently had a baby, and it sounds really daft, but I put most of the symptoms down to just being knackered because of the new baby, and maybe like thirsty because we'd started weaning him, so we hadn't put salt in food, and then I was like, oh, maybe when I eat normal food or I grab a burger or something, I'm just like incredibly thirsty. So I just kind of reasoned off a lot of the symptoms as just sort of everyday life, and then I went to the doctor on something completely different. I went to get some new migraine medication, and I just happened to mention that I was thirsty and I'd lost a bit of weight. So yeah, he ran my blood straight away, and I think that was the Monday, and then I had a phone call on the Thursday saying you need to get to hospital now. You're in something called DKA, and and so a lot of type 1s the first they know about it is they actually get quite poorly quite quickly. And yeah, so I went to the hospital and they tested my blood glucose, and we're talking about testing blood glucose like on your blood and stuff, and a normal range is probably between sort of 4 and 7 for someone who doesn't have diabetes. But I think mine, when I was diagnosed, was 29.
Oh wow!
So and that's probably similar for Chris and Lucy and Louise as well, I would imagine.
Yeah, I was, I think, 32 when I was first tested. But then it was when you don't have that knowledge. Like my mum was like, well, what have you had today at school? And I was like, oh, I did have a bag of Skittles and stuff like that. And at that point, you don't know that even if I've had that, my blood sugar should never be at 32 with that, like in a normal situation. But yeah, so then we actually left it until the next day to go up to the hospital because no one had, we sort of brought a testing kit ourselves. So no one had sort of said, oh, that's really bad, you need to go to doctors. We thought, oh, if I fast overnight and see what my blood sugar is in the morning, and then it was still 27. So obviously at that point it was like, okay, no, I think we really need to go see someone. But yeah,
I had a similar experience. I was playing out and my mum called me in because she'd recognised the symptoms and stuff like that. And she called me in and was like, come on, Luce, we're going to do a finger prick test on your finger, because she has type 2 diabetes, so she had the equipment. And it was just reading as high. It wasn't even reading as a number. And then so we rang my nana, who has type 1, and she said, wash your hands. She might have sweets on her hands or some sugar. Wash your hands and try again. So we did the same, did it again. It was still coming up as high. And mine were 37 when we went in hospital that evening. It took them till about 5 a.m. I think. We went in about midnight and it took them till about 5 a.m. to get them back in range. So it was a rough night.
Wow. Is my audio better now?
That's better.
Oh, good. Yeah, so I don't know how much you heard of what I was saying, but I was listening then to the scores of when people were getting into hospital and being diagnosed. Very similar. I think some of my diagnosis was masked by being a really active kid, running around a lot. And I went in with bloods at my blood glucose level was about 23 to 25. So it was around that mark anyway. But I had the same symptoms as everybody else, thirsty. Didn't really notice the tired thing so much, but very much going to the toilet all the time. And essentially, my mom picked up the symptoms very quickly because she'd seen it in her own dad. So obviously my granddad had type 1 as well. The family links and things like that was something which helped with my diagnosis. So maybe I didn't have to go through some of the challenges that others do with the diagnosis. I know Vicky was saying there about DKA and the dangers of that and going through that. And I didn't have to deal with that just purely because there's some experience in the family, which is unfortunate in some ways, but fortunate that I didn't have to go through any horrendous challenges with being ill and being in hospital. Really, I was in hospital for a few days, but that's how they seemed to deal with it in the 90s. You would go in I was diagnosed in the 90s and I was in for 5 days and 4 nights or something like that. And yeah, it's a different world now in the way that diagnosis is done, but certainly been life-changing ever since that time.
Yeah, I think I was in hospital for 4 days and then they let me out at the weekend to go play football and I had to go back.
I was only in for the night, mate.
Oh, show off.
One little night. I know.
You only got a 1 night stay in hospital, Liz?
I know. And I had an egg cress butty that was crunchy and off holiday.
They must have run out of hospital food for you, Liz. They thought they'd send you home.
That was my first hypo treatment, was an egg and cress butty.
Gross.
Wow.
What awful
treatment.
You all obviously mentioned your blood sugar levels. How do you manage now your blood sugar levels, and do you have anything to help monitor them? Are you on any particular medication, or is there anything like a procedure so you can monitor your levels?
Yeah, so I use something called Freestyle Libra, which is a little sensor. You might see people wearing them when you're out in public. That lets you scan with your iPhone, and that will test your blood sugars. It's called a continuous glucose monitor. And what you do is you just scan and it'll tell you where your blood sugar levels are at and where they're going, whether they're just going in a straight line or whether they're spiking or whether they're heading towards a hypo, which is low blood glucose levels. So it's really good with like technology. When I was first diagnosed, we didn't have that. So it has really come on. So that's how I use that bit of tech to manage my blood glucose levels.
Yeah, I'm also on the Freestyle Libra as well. And so the latest version of it also, they've updated it so you've got alarms. So you set it to certain levels so it can send a signal to you when you're going to either go low, so you can kind of try to prevent the hypo, or if your blood sugars are spiking too high, you might need to do an extra dose of insulin. So I guess along with the continuous glucose monitoring, we generally, most type 1s will have injections of some sort, which I think most, I might be wrong if it's not most, but we'll have a fast acting one which you'll take around mealtime. And then you'll also have like a background insulin, which kind of just like keeps you topping over throughout the day. That some people take that once a day and some people take it twice a day. So yeah, it's the combination of that helps us try keep it in good range.
Yeah, spot on. It's very, very similar to how I manage using technology mixed with injections as well. So important to note that obviously there are some people that wear pumps as well. So some people will use an insulin pump whilst some will use injections. So just trying to get the word out there and I guess keep it normalized that using technology, things like pumps, we're administering insulin, the same drug, the same hormone, the same thing, but we may do it differently. And everybody with diabetes will want to do their own management differently anyway because it reacts in slightly different ways too. But for me, I use slightly different to the Freestyle Libre. I use the Dexcom at the moment, which is a similar kind of device, monitors your blood glucose levels, sends the numbers to your phone, allows you to see trends and graphs of what's been going on with your glucose levels, but it's a slightly different product. And then obviously I do injections as well, so I'll inject for meals and then I'll have a background injection as well, which basically is the aim for us to continually monitor our blood glucose levels, dose insulin when we need to adjust our levels if they're going too high or for food. And then obviously we'll take on maybe more carbs or hypo treatments and stuff if our levels are dropping too low. Constantly trying to focus on getting between 4 and 10. So it's like another little job that we do to manage, I suppose, every single day.
Yeah, I think as Chris said, it's like another full-time job, really. We can't ever have a day off. We can't ever have a holiday from it. And we get used to relying on the tech that's coming through. I again have got a Freestyle Libre. I guess it's important to say that these things that we stick them in our arms, so they come with like a mechanism that kind of sort of shoot it into your arm, which sounds a bit weird, but I don't quite know how to describe it in a better way. But yeah, these little discs that a needle kind of delivers the sensor into our muscle because it's kind of reading the sugar around the muscle cells in our arms. So that's where most people wear their continuous glucose monitor, and they last about 2 weeks, and then we change them and maybe put them in the other arm, give one arm a rest. And yeah, as Chris said, you know, there's lots of different ones out. There's one called Guardian. There's the Dexcom. Freestyle Libre, I think, is the most common because it's actually the cheapest, and that's available on the NHS now. And I think it's been available on the NHS in Wales for quite a long time. I think it's now been made available in England as well. So for all type 1s and some type 2s. And yeah, it's the tech is really, really cool, and the tech I think is where, you know, a lot of diabetes treatment it's kind of heading, and I think that plays into sport as well, because if we get so used to analyzing numbers and performance and things, but you know, that is how we monitor our health. We're looking at numbers, we're looking at trends, we're looking at patterns, and it's really cool to just be able to have all of that information on your phone. And also it gets sent to the hospital as well, so all the doctors can see it and your nurses and stuff, so you're all looking at the same thing.
I was just going to say as well, shout out Jack, who's just snuck onto the call. And Jack's one of those people that I suppose we look up to in football as a bit of a role model, as Jack's just made a big move over to Bolton. So, and congrats, mate. I haven't spoke to you since you've done it, so congrats on that move. But Jack, if you want to have a chat as well and throw your views in with what it's like as a pro footballer at the moment with Type 1, get yourself on the mic, mate.
Yeah, of course. I've just invited him to speak as well. As well, obviously, we mentioned obviously all the different ways, obviously monitoring your blood sugar levels. But as I mentioned in the space before, I'm not familiar with diabetes. So if something was to happen while you're in public or like just out on the streets and you did need the help, is there anything that just a standard member of the public who doesn't know like me could do to like help you if you were in need or if you were struggling?
I think the most obvious thing would probably to ring an ambulance or some sort of medical help. But the things to look out for is probably someone having a hypo, which is where the blood glucose levels go under 4, which is so they're low. And people can actually come across drunk when they're like this.
Really?
Yeah, so there's been quite a lot of cases where kids have been like arrested or or people have been arrested for being drunk and disorderly, but really they're actually having a hypo. I don't know if anyone's seen Coronation Street recently, but there's a big storyline in there that we've Diabetes UK have worked on with Coronation Street to sort of raise awareness with Summer, I think it is, who's just been diagnosed with type 1, and that happened to her in the show, to sort of raise awareness of the symptoms of a hypo and what people can look out for.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, Lucy, on that. In terms of there's probably some misconceptions, I think, around some of the symptoms that come up when it's dangerous for type 1 diabetes. I certainly think the way that you come across can be seen, like you said, as being drunk. I think there's been many circumstances and a number of stories that I've seen over the years where people have misconstrued the symptoms that they've seen for somebody who's drunk. And unfortunately, it's been dangerous for that person with type 1. And I think that's one of the key things for us tonight, really, is to talk about some of those symptoms, raise awareness of it. So people do question, when you walk past somebody in the street who looks like maybe they've lost an element of control or they can't talk properly because something's not quite right, not just to walk past them and think that they're drunk, but just to have a little think and maybe pose another question to yourself. Could something else be wrong with them? Not that they're just drunk during the middle of the day, because that's, for us, you could save somebody's life just by having another thought around those symptoms. So it's just an opportunity, I think, to talk about it and share that show those key things off, really, that people are not often aware of.
Yeah, I guess some people as well lose their hypo awareness. So I don't know about everyone on the call, but I'm really fortunate that I still do have hypo awareness. Medical teams try and make sure that we keep our hypo awareness because it's really important that you can feel when we're going low. Symptoms like sweating, starting to feel shaky. It's very similar in some ways to hangovers, because obviously that's probably the closest that someone without diabetes is maybe going to feel to low blood sugar. But yeah, there are lots of symptoms. A change in mood as well. So maybe, if you're in work or college and someone seems a bit out of character, it's worth saying, are you okay? Worth just keeping your eyes, out to whether they're wearing something as well, like a bracelet or some kind of medical ID, or maybe I've got tattoos. So, I've got a tattoo on my arm, which hopefully makes people aware. So it's just maybe thinking about those things like medical information, if there's something that you can spot on them that might give you a clue. Maybe, if it's appropriate, feel their arm, see if they've got a sensor in or something like that. It's just becoming aware of what someone with diabetes, living with diabetes, looks like, behaves like, and yeah, like you say, just trying to figure out ways that you could possibly help.
Yeah, of course. And it's just society in general today, it's just like be kind as well, isn't it? Like there's a lot more people that do tend to judge and just have our own opinion on people. And I think we do need to be a bit more considerate, especially because you don't know what people are going through, what people like illnesses they have, or just people in general. I think we do need to be a bit more considerate just in general as like a nation, as people. And yeah, just try and help each other out. I really do think that. But yeah, just moving on as well. Is there anything you do have to maintain? Like, do you have a strict diet or exercise? Is there anything you have to do in particular to like keep your blood sugars like from just basically like, is there anything you have to do? Is there any certain food you have to eat, or is there anything you can't really eat just to like maintain?
I think back in the day, probably when you get diagnosed, it's like,
Yeah.
oh, you really avoid this or avoid that. But I suppose at that point, I was on 1 injection a day, so it just, or was it 2? I can't remember. But basically, you didn't do injections for your meals. It was like you had to have a kind of routine of when you were going to eat, so that the insulin that you had in you would sort of work. But then now with the sort of the technology and the more injections that we do, it does give us the freedom to essentially eat what we want. Obviously, you have to bear things in mind, but it's not like one of those, you know, and people might often say like,
of course.
oh, should you be eating that because you're diabetic?
Yeah.
So, oh yeah, I can eat what I want.
Yeah.
Being mindful is a different thing. But yeah, I don't know if anyone else has. Some people do follow a low carb diet, or I think there's a few other like a keto diet or stuff like that. Like, but in you don't need to do that. Like, it's not a thing you have to do as a diabetic sort of thing. There's again personal choice, just like any sort of diets are.
I guess in terms of management and the way I approach it, and I can talk a little bit about it from a sports perspective. I think there's elements to what Louise said that I take on board quite often. You kind of you get, because you're going into a sports environment, and it's a little bit different to your day to day. I think with food choices and drink choices, maybe day to day, and you know, Jack might have a view on this. Obviously, his day to day in sport is literally his career. My career is more like part time. So there's sometimes day to day where I wouldn't focus too much on the kind of food and the drink choices as much. And I can let the routine go ever so slightly. But when it comes to sort of game day and really focusing in, or maybe a short period of time where I needed to focus in to nail it, because as you can imagine, blood glucose levels, as soon as they fall outside of range, you don't feel so great. And that's important. It's not just important in sport, it's important in people's jobs, people's lives. You need to be able to feel good to do things, whether that's work, whether that's driving, whether that's just being around your family or enjoying what you do. So I think there's an element of like routine and food choices, which sometimes you'll make and you'll make adjustments for, because you know it puts your blood glucose levels, or you've got a better idea that your blood glucose levels will be in a good spot if you stick to those kinds of choices. It was also really interesting to hear, you know, like Vicky, your view on it as well from obviously another industry. I know the other girls. I know Lucy and Louise and how they talk about it. So I've heard a fair bit on how they manage it and how they tackle it. But it's always really interesting for me to see how people approach it, because I've gone down the route of trying to find routine structures, working out how long my insulin lasts, to try and put my levels in a position where they're always in a good spot to be able to do whatever I'm trying to do. And it's not easy doing that, but routine kind of does help, and sometimes repetitive food choices has been a part of that to make it happen.
Yeah, Chris, I think that's where I find things tricky, actually, because as a broadcaster, I work different hours, I'm doing different jobs, all different days of the week. So I find it really hard to get into a routine, I do a radio show really early in the morning. I might then do, a football phone in later on that day. And for me, even though I'm obviously not an athlete, although I'd love to class myself as one, but I'm really not. It's what I do is performance just of a different kind. So, you're dealing with adrenaline levels. There's loads of things that affect your blood sugar, like how much sleep you've had, what the temperature is, how much exercise you've done, if you've had any alcohol. And adrenaline stress can cause your blood glucose to, in a lot of people, to rise. Some people find that it makes their blood sugar go down. Everyone's different. So I think the importance of however you approach your, the way you live with diabetes, it's figuring out what works for you. And as I say, like going back to those patterns, I was really lucky to do something called a Daphne course recently, which is available to people living with type 1 diabetes. It used to be called something else in Wales, I think a Davydd course, but now I think universally across the UK it's called Daphne, and that stands for Dose Adjustment for Normal Eating. And it is about dealing with all those aspects of life and trying to still keep a routine, even though you're not in a routine, if that makes sense. And just even things like sometimes noting down your blood glucose before you eat and seeing what certain foods do to your blood glucose, monitoring it afterwards, and understanding why you're taking that insulin and when you're taking it, and why you might need to split a dose if you're having a particularly fatty meal, which you find that slows everything down. So if you want to have a big pizza with loads of cheese on it, then you might want to split your dose of quick acting insulin, because actually sometimes the insulin will work faster than you can digest the food, and then you might end up with a hypo. So it's just understanding the science and the biology behind it, which again is super useful whatever you do.
Yeah, and Jack, as well, with you, like obviously professional footballer and stuff, how do you manage, like obviously you've got your training, you play football, and then obviously end of season, do you stick to the same plan during an end of season, or is there anything you change?
Sorry for tuning in late, guys.
But it's okay.
When I jumped in, you guys were talking about the Dexcoms and the Freestyle Libras, so I'll try and use them as much as possible throughout the season to keep a close eye on my sugars. I'll sort of stick to a high protein, low carb diet, and that both works well for my sugar levels and just to be physically ready to play. And then just touching on what Chris said about the routines, I'll eat the same pre-match food the night before and the same pre-match food at the exact same the day of the games as well, because through trial and error I found out that that's sort of how my sugars will react best. If I'll try and go out to play with my sugars ideally at 7. I don't know, that's the Australian equivalent. I don't know if you guys work in different sort of quantities over here, but I'll try and go out at 7. But in terms of my diet in the off season, when I go from such a high training load to doing absolutely nothing, for the first week or two, it's quite hard to get my sugars under control again, because I'll just skyrocket, because obviously I'm not training, and when I've been in a high intensity work for such a long period of time, I'll just sort of let my body have a rest and get a bit naughty with the snacks and eating and all that sort of stuff. So obviously the last couple of weeks leading into pre-season, I've really tuned it in again and starting to get back under a bit more control. And yeah, I guess for the most part, I have to be quite strict. But when I do get those couple of weeks of off season, I'll let myself have a couple extra donuts and whatnot.
And just in general, like you all have different jobs. Obviously, you're involved in sport. Obviously, Vicky, with your job as well. Do you find it tough as well, just in general with your jobs and obviously monitoring your diabetes? And do you find it tough sometimes, like certain days where obviously we all have our days where obviously it's tough at work, but do you find it difficult? Like, is there certain days where you find it harder?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I work for Diabetes UK, so it's quite good for me. There's a few of us that have type 1 in the office, so we're all quite relatable with our experiences and things like that. But say if you've had woke up with blood glucose levels out of range, it can sort of set you up quite bad for the day. You've had a bad night's sleep. Sometimes that can really affect your mood in the morning and sort of ruin your day. So sometimes that can affect you. I'm sure the other guys will agree with me.
Yeah, I find if I've had a hypo in the middle of the night and so had broken sleep, getting up for work and going into the office can seem like the last thing you want to do.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, that's the thing. If for me, there was a point where to have a night where there was no hypo, I was celebrating that. I think like usually around the summertime when like pre-season starts to pick up, and more intense exercise and stuff like that, it's a bit of trial and error, to probably similar to what Jack was saying when his blood sugars go out of control when he has his downtime. It's hard when you're going into that intense bit as well, because I find overnight my body kind of just drains. So again, you have that trial and error. So those days going into work, you're just groggy from the start. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. I think the nighttime low blood glucose level is the absolute killer of a day before you've even started a day. If you're waking up at 3 or 4 in the morning with a hypo and you've got to treat it, and then you've got to try and go back to sleep, it's like, yeah, you've made the day harder before it even starts, and it's sometimes no fault of anybody, no fault of our decisions. We've got so many more decisions to make every single day about our doses, about our food choices. It's all a heavy. It weighs heavy when you're trying to manage that around work. Sometimes when the blood glucose levels out of range, you've got to deal with that, and then you might at the same time have a deadline to do with work, or you might be needing to go and do something performance related, where you might have to, hit a time or something like that, or go and deliver a presentation, and all of a sudden these levels are out of kilter, and you've done your best, but for whatever reason, type 1 diabetes, it decided that it wasn't going to let you tackle it in the way that you wanted to. And I think it's kind of accepting some of that sometimes, but also learning as best as you can about how your body responds. It's like becoming a mathematician and a physician all at the same time, and a dietitian. You need to know so much about your body, so much about food, so much about maths and adding things up to just to try and keep yourself on the straight and narrow when you're trying to tackle things that matter to you, whether that's work or sport.
Yeah, of course, and I know a lot of you are linked with obviously football as well. And how do you find playing football with diabetes?
So I want to go first, or I'll go. Yeah, I manage my diabetes quite well. Obviously, I've had it for 10 years now, and that's about the same time as I've been playing football as well. So, like both Jack and Chris mentioned before, getting into a routine is probably the best way to manage it. Knowing what blood glucose level should be at before a game, at half time, and also knowing what sort of snacks to have and how many carbs to take on board before a game is quite important. The same with training and things like that, making sure you've got hypo treatment. So when your blood sugars go low, you tend to treat it with maybe Lucozade or something fast acting glucose, and then follow that up with maybe like 15 grams of carbs, so like a cereal bar, something like that, maybe a couple of digestive biscuits, just so then that you're keeping that blood sugar up for a little bit longer. So yeah, once you get the hang of it. But again, like Louise said earlier, when you're out of season and then you've got to get back into that routine, it's quite difficult. So that can affect your routine. When your routine changes, it affects your blood sugars quite a lot.
I find that when I play sports, that it sort of spikes my blood sugars initially. So it took me quite a while to sort of be brave enough to do some insulin before sports, because generally we do that. We'll take insulin when we're going to have some carbs and have some food that's going to potentially spike our blood sugars. So it was, again, it's trial and error, but I kept finding by half time my blood sugars were getting to the 13, 14s. And obviously, like Chris has mentioned, you don't feel great. you obviously you can't perform as well when your blood sugars are higher as well. So again, I think it's learning. So my experience and Lucy's experience, because our bodies are different, that it's never going to be the exact same. So I think that's where it was. Sometimes I was going to the hospital appointments, and the general thing when you're younger was exercise is going to make your blood sugars sort of go down eventually. And then obviously when I was seeing that mine were going up, I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. So it took a while for me to be brave enough to try a little bit of insulin and get that level back to be able to play football to the best I could. So that kind of works for me now as a routine. But after football, it generally will have a hypo. So before that happens, I'm making sure I'm having food before that happens, straight after a game.
Yeah, of course. And for you ladies as well, like being a woman involved in football, like us girls know it, especially from her game too as well, it can be a struggle anyway. But being a diabetic, do you feel more pressure that you have to prove yourself? Or do you find others being ignorant to you? Have you had any negative experiences?
Yeah, I think we as the diabetes football community, that's some of the things that we speak about quite often. The sort of stigma around diabetes in football, and sometimes when you are treating hypos or high blood glucose levels, and you have to go off at training, or you might have to come off and treat those during a match. You don't want to come across as being lazy or sitting this one out and things like that during pre-season, especially when you're trying to get your fitness back up. Sometimes it can be quite embarrassing sitting out. But like I've spoke to Chris and Louise before, I have a good club behind me, and a lot of my team that I've played for a while. I've played with them for quite a while. So they're all aware of diabetes, and it's quite a nice environment for me to play in. Other people have different experiences, some quite negative. I think I had one once where obviously I used my phone to do my blood sugars, and my physio brought it on, and I scanned blood sugars, and the ref was asking me if I was checking my emails, and I was like, no, I'm diabetic. I'm actually just testing a blood glucose level. So it's things like that sometimes, like people, it'd be better if people are more educated on it, and that's why we're doing things like today to raise awareness of those things. So,
and obviously, like we mentioned the negatives, but this is to everyone as well. Anyone can answer. Is playing football with fellow diabetics boosted your confidence and gave you an extra boost that you're not alone? And even though it can be a struggle and you've had those negative experiences, does it kind of give you a boost not to give up because you do love what you're doing?
Yeah, I think just having that community that, like, I don't have all my friends and family are supportive and understand as much as they can, but there is a difference between talking to them about it and actually talking to someone that's going through the exact same thing. And then having the football element in there as well is you have different conversations that you can help each other and help each other understand things. And then it was just great to see that us group of girls can manage our diabetes, can go and play football, and can just help support each other.
Yeah, I think it's been something that I didn't realise I needed until it sort of happened, and it was something that I'd always been interested in doing, was sort of speaking to somebody else who was going through the same experiences as me, like somebody else who lived with type 1 that was interested in football. But I didn't realise how much of an impact it would have on me and others until we started the diabetes football community. And you start having those conversations, and I've been lucky in the last few years to have conversations with everybody from those that are just playing week in, week out their Sunday league football and they love it and enjoy it, all the way through to people like Jack, and I think Craig's on here as well, that have played in the professional game and are playing in the professional game with type 1. And you learn so much from everybody's experiences, but I gain so much energy from just hearing that my experiences is normal. Like, there's other people out there that are going through the same things as I am, that are tackling the same problems, the same challenges, and they're still doing the thing that they love doing, which is playing football or being involved in football, whatever it looks like. But we're still out there and have that opportunity, and having that peer support and having the opportunity to speak to others in the last few years has been, and I mean the girls can speak for it. They didn't know each other until very recently, till we started the women's team. Lucy and Louise, and you know, you can see how the bond that they've created as a result of that, and you can see that in our men's team that we started with the diabetes football community. It is different, as the girls said. It's just different learning and speaking to somebody that gets it.
No, that's amazing. It really is. It really is. I love hearing of that. I really do. Sorry, Vicky, did I speak over you?
Oh, no, I was just going to say...
Sorry about that.
No, you didn't. I was just going to say that, actually just picking up on what Chris said, just finding confidence from chatting to people that know exactly what you're going through, and it does make you feel less alone. And also, hearing us all just on this group chat talk about having hypos overnight and how it starts our day off really badly. Like, we've all had experiences of that. We know what each of us are explaining when we're talking, and we can really empathize and support. And I think actually type 1 diabetes isn't as common as you think it might be. And sometimes you might not kind of cross paths with someone with type 1 diabetes in your day-to-day life. So that's why it's really important kind of searching out groups or clubs or initiatives that allow you to interact with people that know exactly what you're going through. And when you start talking, then some of those feelings of like anxiety and stress and isolation that you might have to deal with having a long-term health condition that only you know how you feel, and sometimes you might feel like you need to explain yourself to your family or friends, and that gets tiring. And actually there's a lot we have to deal with, and talking about it, like any kind of mental health or just being aware and having that support is so vital, and it makes such a difference.
Yeah, of course. And I feel like I mentioned before, I feel like a lot of people have to be a lot more considerate, and not just about diabetes, but just things in general, because there is a lot of people who are ignorant. And it's like me, I was very honest, like, I'm not familiar with diabetes, and I've really enjoyed this space as well, because obviously I've been educated by all of you. And I was worried at first. I actually messaged Chris. I was worried because I didn't want to, with my questions, I didn't want to come across as like ignorant, because I weren't really familiar with it. But it just makes me happy, like, that you have this community that you can all talk to, and you're just not alone. It really does make me really happy.
Yeah, and as I said to you, Charles, before we came on, you not knowing anything necessarily about our condition, that's quite normal. We go through our lives probably having to explain what our condition is like on quite a regular basis. So it just makes a massive difference to us to have an opportunity like this to sort of share more widely than just the one person that might ask us as we go through our day-to-day lives. The mainstream environment and is where many of us operate. We don't come across people with type 1 every single day. We've got our community, yes, and we speak to each other within that. But for the most part, we just walk through life like everybody else does. So to have an opportunity to just share a little bit about the condition to people that we may bump into the street, who then may recognise when we're doing an injection, that's not, some of the comments that I've been called in the past, like, it's not somebody using drugs, it's somebody using insulin because they've got type 1 diabetes and they're doing an injection. So it just helps us to raise that awareness and to maybe tackle some of the stigma and the stereotype which unfortunately does still exist around our condition. And we just keep doing our best and keep chipping away at it, and our examples and our community and having conversations like this can only really help.
And just obviously we spoke about obviously, like, I'm getting tongue tied. Obviously, we just mentioned about football and stuff, but I just wanted to hear Jack's experience as well, because obviously you mentioned, Chris, that you do speak to him, and obviously with the community you speak to each other. But just from his experience, obviously being a professional footballer, have you ever had any negative experiences, or as a whole, have people been quite considerate? Yeah, just to you, basically.
No, I think I've been quite lucky with the teams and the environments that I've been in. Almost a bit of a novelty, to be honest, in most change rooms, because everyone just wants to ask questions, and rather than being sort of ignorant about things, people seem to be genuinely interested in what's going on. I think the most negative thing that happened to me was when I was about, I think, 16. I used to have jelly beans instead of Lucozade as my low fix, and I had them.
Oh, let's try and get Jack back. We had him back. Obviously, just until we get Jack back, this one's for you, Chris. Obviously, since you've formed your career around your diabetes and helping others in similar situations, have you found other people who have managed to do the same?
Yeah, I mean, there's people. Obviously, I work for JDRF, which is the lead type 1 diabetes specific charity in the UK. Obviously, Lucy works in diabetes as well, so she's at Diabetes UK working for the other charity. And then there's people within JDRF that live with the condition as well. So it's really nice to be in an environment where you know that your colleagues understand you, and obviously it's kind of cool as well at the same time, because the mission you work for is helping yourself, but also the other people that are just like you as well. So Lucy might feel the same as well about working at Diabetes UK, but it's certainly been a really positive thing for me. And also, since I started opening up about diabetes, and only 4 or 5 years ago, and then starting the diabetes football community, it just makes life easier knowing that there's others out there, and whether that's at work or whether that's outside of work, it's just made it a lot easier, and forging a career working in a charitable sector, supporting people like me and people that I interact with through the diabetes football community. It's just been an absolute privilege, to be honest.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's absolutely fantastic. Lucy, did you want to add anything onto that? I know Chris mentioned your name.
Yeah, no, like I said earlier, I think working with people with the same condition with you makes going to work a lot easier as well. But also, like you said, being able to go to work every day and to work on something that you're passionate about, obviously it's helping yourself as well, and those around you that have diabetes. So yeah, it's a pleasure to work in that industry.
Sorry, Jack, I think we lost you before, so I think I've added you back as a speaker if you wanted to carry on. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I'm in a hotel, so I don't know how good the Wi-Fi is. How far did I get before I dropped out? Can you remember?
You just mentioned the jelly beans and then you cut out.
Yeah, that was probably the most negative thing, even though it wasn't really negative. Just one of the boys didn't actually realize that I needed them for a reason, and he just was hungry halfway through the session and decided to eat them. So that's probably as negative as it's got for me. I've been really fortunate with all the managers that I've ever had. All I've ever said is, look, sometimes I might just need to jump off and have this Lucozade if I'm struggling, and they, they've got absolutely no problems with it. And yeah, I mean, tomorrow I'm heading into a new change room of pre-season day one tomorrow. I don't know anyone. I've not met anybody. So I'm sure I'll be answering all sorts of questions as soon as I pull out the insulin pen at lunchtime. So I'm used to it. I've been fortunate with every group I've been involved in that everyone's been understanding and more interested than anything. So yeah, in terms of that, it's always been a positive experience rather than a negative one.
I was just going to add, Char, can you add Craig Stanley?
Of course I will.
He's on the call, and he's obviously played professional, and I think he might have something to say on some of his experiences in the program living with type 1.
I have invited him. He just needs to accept.
Craig, you need to accept, mate.
Should have a request.
You've just got to unmute yourself now, Stanners. Go on, mate.
Here we go, Ryan. Hello.
Hi.
Mod cons, eh? I'm no good with them, as Brighty would know. So I just want to say, congrats on what you're doing and everything, Brighty. The same as you. You know that, mate, and the girls are doing a fantastic job. Do you know what I mean? So, and then that's it, really. So yeah, just talking about obviously diabetes, football, this, that, and the other. So yeah, just it's crazy, really. I ain't really had that many bad experience with it and stuff. It's just been obviously just get on with it. As Brighty's said numerous times, I didn't really say much when I played. It was just got on with it and didn't really want to make any excuses really about playing with it, and just obviously got on with it. But yeah, didn't really have that many bad experiences really regarding it. Just managed it quite well and obviously did okay with it really. So that's basically it really. So not much to say really. Quite boring with it really. So just listening to all yous, and it's obviously good to hear all your stories and everything else really. So yeah, congrats.
Oh, brilliant. We're actually going to have a question and answer session in a minute because some of the listeners have sent in questions. If you want to stay, and you're more than welcome to have your input.
All right, no problem. Thank you very much.
No, you're welcome. So we have got some questions. The first one was, how does being diabetic affect being a footballer? What are the main challenges, particularly for females?
For me, would probably be hypos when you're playing football. Obviously, that interrupts your match, or even when your blood sugars go high as well. That massively affects you because it obviously brings on a lot of thirst when your blood sugars go high, which then obviously creates cramp, which can obviously affect your performance. Say with hypos, you obviously need to go off to treat them, so that does interrupt your match, your training, things like that. So that would be the biggest challenge for me. I don't know about you, Louise.
Yeah, it's probably similar, and just finding out a routine that works for you for training and for your match days. But I think it's definitely not something that holds you back from getting involved, and it definitely shouldn't. So there's always ways to manage and change the way you're doing things to help you get through the games, but it shouldn't hold you back from getting involved and doing something that you love.
The next question is, do you think diabetes is taken as seriously as it should be? Do you find yourself having to brush off jokes / banter about it often?
All the time. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding because most people see stories maybe in the paper or magazines or online about diabetes and kind of eat to beat diabetes, and they think that it is that you eat too much sugar, or like you say, all those comments of should you be eating that. Like I had it the other day. It was someone's birthday in work and someone brought in cakes, and they turned around and went, "Oh, I didn't bring in any diabetic cakes for you." And I was like, that's okay. That's what insulin's for, So I think, again, we're just back to that lack of education.
Yeah, of course.
And so it's about awareness. And I think because diabetes is so complicated and you've got the two types, it's no one's fault, but it is that kind of that joke about sugar, eating sugar, should you be having that? And also, some people make jokes about hypos as well. They kind of learn the word hypo and use it as a bit of a like, oh, he's gone hypo, look at him, for someone that maybe isn't quite with it. And and that can be a bit crap because you think, well, hang on, do you actually know what it feels like to experience a hypo? And it's really not great. And the effects of it can last for hours afterwards and make us feel really poorly. So I think, of course, like with everything, people make silly comments or maybe don't have that understanding, and like you said, it's about being kind to each other and just trying to have a bit more understanding, or if you don't understand something, then ask.
Yeah, 100%. And do you think that more can be done to educate people on diabetes? And are you taking this upon yourselves, or what organisations can help? Can Her Game 2 help in any way? Just anything. We're all us girls, honestly, we want to do as much as we can. And even if it's just spaces like this to raise awareness, honestly, we're more than happy to, because obviously, like I mentioned before, I want to find out as much as I can, and I want to be educated too, because if I can help someone in any way, and like we mentioned before, even if it's like ringing an ambulance if someone's in need, just anything like that, I just really want to be educated on it.
Yeah, I think today is a massive start. I think obviously you guys have a massive organisation campaign, so to be able to come on here and raise awareness and share our experience is a great start. Obviously, there is other organisations out there. There's JDRF. There's us, the diabetes football community. There's Diabetes UK. You know, there's plenty of organisations out there that have volunteers, local groups, and things like that. There's so much out there for people living with diabetes, and also for those that aren't living with diabetes that want to educate themselves.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more with you, Lucy. There's those organisations, there's opportunities. Things like tonight can only help. As I said earlier, I think the key for us, or I feel this is sometimes key anyway, is that we need to speak in mainstream audiences, and this is predominantly going to be a mainstream audience listening to us talk about what it's like to live with diabetes, because then that helps us break some of those myths and those stereotypes and some of the stigmas which they do impact on people's lives. You know, we have to do the management side, the injections, the insulin pump, the blood glucose monitoring. But in 2022, when we're talking about being kind to each other and being more accepting and understanding, we need to do that for health conditions. And I feel that, you know, opportunities like this can only help us to get more awareness out there, so people are more accepting and more understanding of maybe things that previously I may have come across within the world that I've operated in. And I mentioned it earlier about people making jokes and wisecracks, and Vicky said it earlier as well, but it's how we go about tackling those, and things like this can only help, you know, putting things out there in terms of graphics and opportunities to raise awareness on podcasts and videos, and just through a mainstream setting is just massive for us. And obviously we've got lots of opportunities if anyone wants to help as well. You know, if anyone's inspired by listening to this or anything that we've done after and would like to help with in diabetes in some way, there's organisations, there's opportunities like the diabetes football community, where we'll be doing the women's team. I know Kaz, I've tapped up Kaz. She's coming up and bringing her trainers to the session next month with the girls. So if anyone else wants to jump in and get involved, then by all means, please do. But it's just the more the merrier, really, and helping us to raise awareness and get involved with whatever you feel that you can help us on. But these opportunities are priceless to us.
And I think probably one of the things this week, which is, so I live in Wales, I work for the BBC in Wales, and we've got Diabetes UK Cymru. So if, you know, anyone is living in Wales, then sometimes the healthcare is slightly different between Wales and England, and there are some things that are available that aren't over the border. So it's worth following, like Diabetes UK Cymru as well. But you know, as I say, I work for the BBC. I've made a film about a lack of psychological support for those being diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, because it's something that's quite lacking, especially for young adults and those that maybe do get diagnosed slightly later in their life. Like for me, I obviously lived my life one way for 30 odd years, and then all of a sudden, you know, my life's been turned upside down, and sometimes that's quite tricky to get your head around. And as an adult, you don't get much support. You know, you get told you've got type 1, you get given your insulin, you're sort of told how to do it, and you've just got to swim. And I think for young adults, there's a particularly prominent group that, you know, they're hitting their teenage years, they're just getting more independence, they're just getting that sense of freedom, and then all of a sudden, wham, they're hit with a diagnosis that's life-changing. And not having the right support and not having people to talk to can be really damaging. And that means that if they mentally can't cope with it, they're not physically coping with it, they're not maybe doing the right medication, they're not looking after themselves, they might not even be injecting their insulin because they feel like denial about the whole thing. So there's a lot of work at the moment to raise awareness for mental health and also psychological support for those being diagnosed, and realizing that actually if people are mentally in a great place, they're going to be far better at looking after themselves and far better with their insulin regimes, which means generally their health is going to be better and they're going to be much more able to cope living with type 1 diabetes.
Obviously, Vicky, as well, you mentioned you made a film. Have you got any links or anything to it? Or
Yeah, I can share
Yeah,
this
if you
evening.
share
I'll
it,
pop that on my profile, so at Vicky Blight. And
oh, brilliant.
we've managed to also make sure that it doesn't disappear off the BBC website. So it's on there so that anyone can click on it and watch it at any time.
Oh, brilliant. If you could send me the link and I'll share it and stuff as well. I'll share it on my
Awesome.
profiles, and I've got a podcast as well, so I'll share it on my podcast one.
Awesome. Thank you, love.
No, you're more than welcome. Like I said, I want to try and help as much as I can as well and raise awareness, because you never know like who you can come across, and somebody who on my profile might have diabetes. It's like I got a tweet before actually, and I think Chris actually saw it. It was from someone called Josh, and he actually put I've recently just been diagnosed with diabetes. It's nice to see this sort of stuff. Keep up the great work. And just comments like that. And it's like, I didn't know that he'd been diagnosed, and just things like that. It's just really helpful.
Well, you never know, do you, Char,
Exactly.
where the knowledge is going to help you as well. So this conversation, when we talked about symptoms earlier, people may go away from this conversation knowing the symptoms of type 1 diabetes, and as a result may be able to help somebody else pick up the fact that they need to go to the doctor, GP, hospital as soon as possible because they're likely to be diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. That's a different conversation to them not knowing the symptoms 2-3 weeks later and potentially, unfortunately, losing their life because they've undiagnosed type 1 diabetes. If you know the symptoms, you could potentially save somebody's life. And that's what these conversations, I hope, will, that's one element of it, that we can, potentially save somebody's life out there by somebody knowing the symptoms that didn't know the symptoms before.
Yeah, of course.
And just the power of awareness. Like I had an example today, actually. I recorded a short video for Diabetes UK Cymru at the beginning of the week for Diabetes Week, which they put out on their socials. And obviously people have been seeing it and getting in touch. But I walked into work earlier, was walking through our massive BBC Cymru Wales building, and someone shouted my name from across the floor. And this lady that I'd never met before just said, "You're Vicky, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "You did a video for Diabetes UK Cymru." I'm like, "Yeah." She said, "My son was diagnosed last year and he's going through a really rough time at the moment. He's 17." And she just started talking and opening up about the issues that he's having and how he's finding it really, really tough. And it just shows you like one little video on Facebook or on Twitter, and that starts a conversation. And from that conversation I said, "Look, you've got my email, pass it on. If he wants to go for coffee, we can chat. If he doesn't know anyone with type 1 and he needs to just say, yeah, it's rubbish, isn't it?" And someone be able to connect with him on that level, then you've helped one person. And then extrapolate that out across the platforms, and we can help more than one person. So yeah, it is really powerful, and it is all about awareness.
Lucy, did you want to speak? Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to come in there and just say it's really good that Vicky just pointed that out, because not only is it hard for those actually living with diabetes, it's hard for those families and carers, people they live with as well. A lot of people forget about those that have to care for someone with type 1 diabetes. I know my mum, my dad and my sister, it was hard for them to sort of get their head around type 1 diabetes when I was first diagnosed. And so it's nice that she's got someone to go to as a parent of someone with type 1 to talk about those things. And, Vicky, when you speak to her about your experience, it could really put her mind at ease. And it's something that's really nice for her to look up to, someone living with type 1 diabetes, for her son who's got it as well.
Oh, honestly, this space has it's been a real I'm getting tongue tied. It's been a real eye opener, and it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to each and every one I can't even speak, each and every one of you, honestly. And just thank you so much for taking your time out and sharing all of your experiences. It really does mean a lot to me and the girls. The final question, and this one's actually from me, and it's to each and every one of you. If you have one bit of advice you could give to a diabetic that is unsure about joining the football community, or just to play football in general due to any worries they might have, what would it be?
I think for me, it'd just be don't let diabetes hold you back from doing anything. There's a lot of support out there. There's a lot of people out there that are all going through a similar experience to you. So speak up, get the help. I think, like Chris said before, you don't know how much you need it until you actually have it. So speaking to people out there with diabetes, it's such a good experience. And like for the diabetes football community, we're all very welcoming. We're a great group of girls. The men are a great group of lads. So please don't be worried about coming and joining and getting involved. We're all very kind people. So just get in touch if you want to join in.
Yeah, I think I would probably just echo what Lucy said. Definitely don't let it hold you back. And I think if you're worried, get in touch with the team or the coach that you want to join and have a word with them first and express how you feel. And I'm sure everyone in football is welcoming, well, hopefully. And if you speak about your worries, they'll probably just encourage you to come along. And definitely get involved with TGFC women and the men's side as well if it's for males, because that can hopefully give you the confidence to join in.
Yeah, I don't think there's too much more to add. I think Lucy absolutely smashed it. I think it's about not allowing your condition to define you, ensuring that you live the life that you want to live in the way you want to live it. Yeah, it's going to be tough at times and there will be challenges, but it's being prepared. And it's as long as you're prepared and you're accepting that things may not go to plan every single time and there's going to be some rough to get to the smooth with this condition, as long as you can kind of embrace that, take it on board, learn from the mistakes and put in measures to try and or even techniques, tools and learnings from those mistakes to get it closer to better next time round. That's all you can do. And yeah, just ensure that you don't let it get in the way of the things that you love doing.
And I guess ultimately there's nothing better than a team. And, that team mentality in sport generally is what lifts you up. And you don't need to feel that because of your condition, you are the weak link or you're the one letting the team down, because actually it's up to the people around you to encourage you when you're having those moments of self-doubt. And I think that's what the football community does. And as Lucy has said, and Louise and Chris as well, it's such a welcoming family. And actually, if you're feeling fearful about exercise or sport, then there's no better place to start than with a team sport, because you've got people around you that are looking out for you.
It's amazing, and that obviously ties in with me and the girls at her game too, and obviously Mark. I don't want to leave Mark out. It's just amazing, like how you think you're different, and it's like with me, it's like with football in general as well. I thought I was different because of obviously the abuse and the sexist like comments and stuff, and then a big group of girls came along. They built this campaign. Kaz, obviously the founder, who's listening, and it's just amazing how just people can come together and just build a community. And I just think you're all amazing, and thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your experiences. We really do appreciate it. And if there's anything any of us girls and Mark can do at her game too, honestly, please let us know. Please let us know.
Thank you. And thank you for having us today as well. And thank you for hosting it, Charlotte, because I know it's not an easy task doing these things. I know Twitter Spaces is quite new, so well done to you as well.
Oh,
and thank you for the
so
opportunity.
Much. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, thank you guys.
Thanks very much for having us. Really appreciate it. And I hope it's been insightful, useful for those that are listening. And it's certainly massive for us to be able to have the opportunity to share what it's like during Diabetes Week.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you
so much.
Oh, thank you guys. And Vicky, please share that link as well, because I will share it on my timeline.
Will do.
Oh, thank you so much, everyone.